to the Berg Podcast. Thanks for joining us today. With me today is Dan.
Hey, everybody.
And Ford.
Hey, how's it going?
And we're talking a little bit about the labor pool, internal candidates, external candidates, and something that struck me as I literally was just starting this introduction. I got an email today, or a text today from someone I know at the high school. And we do a lot of interaction with the local schools, which is cool. It's a good way to find young people who may or may not be interested in the construction industry. And it was a text asking if we had somebody in like a specific position and whether or not we would be interested in allowing that young person to shadow somebody. And it made me think literally as we were starting this conversation about how that's a habit that we sort of changed 3 or 4 years ago, where we got real intentional with kind of opening our doors to young folks in BCTC and trade schools, and knowing that a lot of them probably aren't going to work out, but trying to make sure that as an avenue to some internal and external recruiting efforts, we're gonna bring a bunch of people through the doors at times, and it was cool to get those text messages because like we used to have to really like beat down the doors. We would be like, hey, do you have anybody? Send us 3 or 4 high school kids. And now every once in a while, not all the time, but we're getting the messages saying, can we send someone to you? So I thought that was cool. That's not specifically what we're talking about.
No, but it is. I mean, we to your word, intentional. We are very intentional about bringing kids in and trying to show them what it is we do and what the industry has to offer. And it all goes to that, rising tide raises all boats idea that, they may not end up here, but if we can all do it and we all get some people into the field, into the industry, then it provides opportunity for all of us if that number is larger. And that's really important because there's the number is going down faster than it's being replenished. And we're also in a situation where when we identify people on our own team and we say these are, good individuals with a good work ethic that want to get stuff done, that want to be productive, that care, these positive attributes that lead to them being successful in whatever they're doing it, whether it's, labor or pipe layer, operator, doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Mechanic. That we identify that, but then we tend to promote that, which is good, except, there's not enough, they can't do 3 jobs, right? They can't be like assistant foreman, operator, and pipe layer, labor, like they're going to have to do 1. And so by promoting, you create a hole somewhere else. So we're trying to promote, but also promote at a reasonable time.
Sure. Well, and part of that internal development, it's really interesting, is it's like a couple of components, right? They've got to be a good culture fit. They've got to have been given enough opportunity to develop a set of skill and see some success and some failure. And they've got to have a support mechanism in place so that as they grow out of one role and into the next role, they're not kind of just left stranded. And we've been pretty candid on the podcast before about areas where we've seen some success, but also areas where in the past we were not good at, right? We found good people who fit our culture and knew a job and thought that was a sign that they were ready for the next job. And it wasn't always that sign. And even if they were ready, we weren't always ready to support them in the new role. So I think, one of the struggles that comes with that different sort of mindset is that support piece, I think, is so difficult because you got to support people generally with people who have more experience, right? And Ford, you had started to kind of say that when we were starting, before we actually hit record here, that like the mix is so delicate at times of having, young people coming into the industry or being promoted from within, but having people with sufficient experience to sort of lead, guide, and mentor them as well.
Yeah, because I think that, sometimes people are like, oh, well, somebody got brought in to the team, maybe in a position that they wanted, but maybe they weren't ready for it yet. And that other person had a skill set. And so I think there's a healthy mix because one thing is for sure, like there is different skills even between all of us, internal and the team, and somebody that might have some skills that we don't have anywhere in the company yet. Bringing somebody in to teach the rest of the team those skills is very valuable. The other thing I was thinking about as you started your first part there, Kelly, Kelsey, some of those very first ones that like, you know, they were rock stars and are rock stars, and we didn't really, we didn't even have a mechanism when we brought them part of the team, but they just did such like, hey, this is an opportunity or a way to, bring up some young people, and they really led the way just by doing a great job when they started out from, basically straight out of high school or even before that, and just figuring out what needed to be done no matter what task was thrown at them.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that like in different ways, with no plan at all, like we were fortunate enough to have them working directly under the three of us at times, which means that while we weren't intentionally mentoring them, they were getting the support that they needed for some of the examples that you just set there, right? So on a day-to-day basis, if they needed something, they were usually coming directly to one of us, and that isn't always the case, right? That's become increasingly difficult as the size of our organization changes. Our guys can't necessarily always come directly to you, Dan, or directly to you, Ford. They've got to, kind of have those intermediate pieces in place. Whether it's that foreman or superintendent or project management level that can be that support mechanism.
And it's hard because you have to step back. That's one of the really difficult things for me is that certain people who have been here longer will still come directly to me. And even people who are maybe newer, but know that I, based on my see problem, fix problem nature, that if you can get to me, I will react pretty quickly. I'll make a decision and try and react. And so I've had to really work on being intentional about not reacting, about saying like, okay, well, did you speak with this person about that? Because I need you to speak with them because it's their responsibility. I don't want to step on their toes. I want to let them do their job. I'm not trying to do their job for them, which is difficult. And it's also been a difficult line to walk as we, one of our internal promotions specifically, as we did it, and I sort of tried to step back from landfill, and I expected it to run a little smoother, frankly, than it did because of how it had run previously. And it just didn't for a number of different reasons. It really had nothing to do with anybody that was managing the job per se. It didn't run as smooth, and I just didn't catch it. I would have caught it sooner had it been a year ago, 18 months ago. I would have seen it and probably reacted, but I didn't because I sort of expected a certain level of I expected a certain behavior out of a number of people on our team, and they didn't relay a message that I thought they would have relayed. But I have to step back and look at it and say, you know what? Maybe they never would have relayed that message, but I would have seen it, and so then I would have been the thing. I would have been the mechanism. They would have got people to realize there was something going on, and then we would have done something. Maybe they never would have done it. But I'm not gonna waste time to figure out which of those it was. It doesn't really matter.
Sure.
But it is part of the problem as we continue to grow is figuring out how to develop those new lines of communication and then support those lines of communication in a way that they have a similar result, a similar action or reaction to something going on.
Well, and you're in a tough spot in that, like, it's dual faceted, and it always kind of has been, but like you being formerly the project manager of landfill and the director of operations, or then COO, or now president, like that dual nature is, you kind of have to be both the leader of the organization as a whole, but also a mentor for the person that you're passing that information off to and expecting them to do that landfill PM job, right?
Yep.
So it's kind of a difficult spot to be in, I would assume, and maybe it's playing out for you that way, just because like you're trying to let that person likely grow on their own, maybe trying to figure out if you've stepped back too far or haven't leaned in enough or whatever.
Exactly.
So,
that's exactly it. It's a question of, the hardest thing to do I think when you're going through these processes is to allow someone to grow, but support them. You know, it's for me at least. I'll say that's difficult for me because I have trouble with where that line is unless someone tells me. If you tell me exactly what you need, I will try and do that. But when I'm trying to figure out what you need, that's a little bit more difficult, I think, for anybody, but definitely for me, is a little more difficult to figure out how I let you grow. And sort of to Ford's point, with me, when Ford worked with me on some of this stuff, was he had to let me fail a little bit, but then try and figure out where that line is. And as I shift, for me personally, as I shift back and forth between trying to, sort of steer the boat and then step back into operations, it's a bigger step. So sometimes when I start to focus on where the boat's supposed to go, and I'm not watching the motor run, all of a sudden I turn around and I'm looking, I'm like, wait a minute, and that's happened. You know what I mean? It happened in September. I looked at it, and transparently, you and I have talked about it, that I looked at it, and as soon as I saw it, I knew there was a problem. From something that didn't trigger a problem to anybody else. But to me, it meant it was a problem, and it was something so silly. It was literally just that something was too perfect. And I don't want to get too much into the weeds, but there was a number that was too perfect. The fact that the number was perfect told me it was wrong. And I sort of had to look at that and say, like, okay, would they have known that? Because in other scenarios, that number could be okay. But in this world, that number can never happen because it's not going, it's too unlikely. It won't happen. If it happens, it would be the anomaly. So it should catch your attention, but it didn't. But as soon as I saw it, it caught my attention and then sent me down the rabbit hole, at which point I realized, like, okay, I got to get involved here because something's out of whack. Something's not right. We need to look at this and figure it out. So we're going through that process now, but it's tricky to manage that for me.
Well, I think it's tricky across the board, right? So I mean, talk about the example we were talking about last week with Jack, right? So, sort of like Stetson pulling Jack up into that foreman role from what quickly transpired from an operator, laborer to operator to assistant foreman and now foreman, all within the span of about 3 years, really. And that's good because Stetson, as he's grown, needed to kind of pull someone up behind him. And now Jack's kind of saying the same thing, like, who do I pull up behind me? Who fills that role behind me? And in that exact chain of people, it's the right guys, right? Which is awesome because Stetson was the right guy for Jack and Jack's the right guy for Zach. And we're seeing the chain work. But the chain's got to be complete because if it's not, and there's breaks in the chain, or you're missing a link somewhere, you end up with some trouble spots for sure. So that's, that balance is super tough. We talk a lot about our desire to promote internally, and we do. I mean, I think the biggest testament of our people's own success is that they grow inside the company, and not flat, just moving from job to job necessarily or learning new skills in the same position, but getting opportunities for success and growth outside of those positions and maybe into positions vertically at times. But making sure that there's enough experience in front of them and that they've got the capacity to pass on the experience to those behind them is really delicate.
Yeah. Well, and even how I think one of the things that we are really true to who we are about is if you start to look at the number of people who have moved, not just vertically, but around, right? So guys who we believed were a strong culture fit, we believed wanted to be part of the team and we wanted to be part of the team, but it wasn't quite right where they were. And we just keep shifting little bit, try and find a different spot. And we've done that with operators. We've done it with laborers. We've done it with people in the shop. We've done it with people in the office. We've done it everywhere where we say, this person has to be a good fit here. We just, we make it our fault sometimes. And I'm not saying it is our fault, but we make it our duty, our responsibility, I should say, to try and find a spot that this person can fit. And I think that goes back to the core of the original ideas that Ford had when he started this, that if you find good people and then you try and put them in a place where they can succeed.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, that and it was, sorry, but it was funny. We were talking to another company the other day, and they were like, "Well, people we have here, basically either quit or retire." And it was so interesting to me, that mentality, just because, Dan was talking with me, and it was just like, you want to keep getting fresh in there because to a level, like you got to keep everything going forward. And things are constantly changing. Work is changing, types of work, all that stuff is changing. So it's difficult to there is no stayed, there is no just plug it in and go. Everything is constantly evolving. And I think that's one of the things that we really have adapted to because we like change a lot. But I mean, it is, you hear a lot of companies talking about that, how like they used to do something the same way. And it's like, I mean, at this point, if some process stays in place for 5 minutes, it's like a lifetime at this point. I mean, you can't really, you got to constantly keep looking at stuff and adjusting stuff. There's nothing you can just turn it on and let it run. It just doesn't work that way anymore.
No, I feel like anything technology related, I am now like one of the old guys, right? Like I used to be like the kid who wanted the new cell phone every year, and I wanted the next best camera, or when I got my first Nokia with like the keyboard on it, like that, that was like the coolest thing ever because it increased my productivity, right? So much. And Ford, you were a BlackBerry guy for a long time, and I used to carry a BlackBerry and an iPhone just to stay. So you had like both pieces of the technology, but like all of those things now, I'm like, oh man, they came out with another cell phone, another version of the same phone again this year, and like at some level, what you're really doing is you're starting to say like was that necessary? And then in like the exact same breath, you're kind of looking at it and you're like, oh yeah, that actually was absolutely necessary. So like if you kind of wait on those things and you don't say like we're gonna keep pace, I don't know. Yeah, the technology one just always strikes me as the kind of the same thing. Like we can't sit still anymore. Like I can't be the old guy in the room saying, isn't that cell phone I gave you 5 years ago still good? Because if the guy's trying to use HTSS or some of the other apps that we use, and he just can't even update them anymore. Like I can't be that part of the problem.
Yeah, well, but it's also hard, I think, when you're looking at, as we talk about change and how we change, is I think when you see companies that don't have, things are always just the same, sort of that people either quit or retire here. You probably hit a point where you were just consistent. Like, I don't want to say stagnant because that has a negative connotation, but rather you've just plateaued and decide you want to run at this level. And I think even now that's not where we are as a company. We had a pretty, as sometimes you say, violent, rise, growth. We had an explosive growth pattern. And then we had to reel it back in out of necessity.
Yeah.
And now we're trying to like find ourselves again. So it's, for a while, people would say like, well, they're like teenagers, right? We were like growing so fast and like we were this new thing and we could do anything. Sure. And then you'd think that the next step would be that you're like, oh, I'm mature now and everything's good. But for us, it was not. For us, it was like we must have been like a young teenager. You know what I mean? And we like realized we made some mistakes. And it stung you, and we got to figure it out. And now we got to like build back and get to it. So there's not that stable point for us where everything just stays the same. Like that's not. Right. Maybe it'll never be who we are. I mean, I don't know, but I know. We've talked about it many times, right? But the instability at this point is even. I don't want to use instability, but the variability, the change, is the norm. And so that's an environment you have to be comfortable in. And it sort of speaks to how we all operate, that we're always willing to like jump in. Like we can do this other thing. We got a hole here. Let's fill that. Who can do this job? And trying to get to a point where we feel like all the people are in the right seats on the bus. Yeah. You know what I mean? And then we can really start to see, let's see how fast the bus can go or how far or whatever you want the analogy to be.
Do you think, I think in some ways, and maybe I'm wrong here, I think in some ways a little bit of that is dictated for better or worse by our size. I mean,
I do. Yeah. I agree. Ford had said to me a long time ago that there was no one that was, it's fine. We weren't this size.
Sure.
But when we were a small construction company, Ford said, there's two kinds of construction companies. There's us, and then there's the big guys. And there's nobody in between. And then we grew the company to something in between that doesn't really exist.
Yeah. And so it's been like a pro and a con. Like we are in many ways maneuverable and adaptable and can kind of change the face, so to speak, of Berg, kind of go after different types of work or different makeups in regards to our division and make that shift pretty easily at times. And not that it's not painful, but it doesn't take an enormous shift, right, to do it. But then in regards to that, I think, like we're still a relatively young company, right? We celebrated 20 years in 2024. Is that right? Did I get that right?
Yeah.
And we're like, we can look back and almost break our 20 years, almost 2 years now into like 5-year segments. It's crazy. Kind of have like the before Dan, right? And then, like Dan shows up, Brian shows up, and then we've got COVID. And so we've got kind of like before Dan or before COVID. And now we're kind of have like a before and after, like Longwood, truthfully, like, cause that sort of like changed the way we acted and looked for a long time. And so like every 5 or so years, we've got these like shifts in who we are as a company. And I think a lot of it has to do with size, and you see it a little bit in our employment patterns, a little bit when you look back at like the trends and the history and the big growth spots and the gaps, truthfully, right? Like we're coming up on an event that we always do. We won't in the spring.
Years of service.
Our years of service dinner. And we started it 5 years ago. 4 years ago, 5 years ago,
maybe 5 years,
because we were in a spot where every year we had new people hitting those 5-year, 10-year anniversaries, and it's a lot of fun. And this year we have people hitting 10 years, right? 10 and 10 some plus, and it's obviously a bunch in the middle, but no one hitting 5 years. And you trace it back, and that was COVID.
It's COVID.
So we had a period of time where, like a lot of people, and especially the Northeast and some other parts of the country, but we shut down. And so like, what does that do? When you like kind of have to shift every 5 years who you are and what you do. And that, from that, and I kind of wandered there, but what I was really trying to tie it back to was like from an experience module or experience curve internally of our folks, like when you start to talk about who do we have that can pull people up, who can mentor, who can lead, how do we promote internally, and how often do we have to sort of leave the property and bring someone in, right? I think like stuff like that starts to be impactful when you look at it.
Yeah, and I mean we've been successful with it lately. We've started to see that we've brought in some good solid people that are experienced, and brought them into the fold and started to build back up again that way. But it is still tricky, you know what I mean? Because it's COVID changed a lot of things, you know what I mean? And it impacted us, and there's a lot of people still feeling the impact of it today in terms of the market instability and all the other things going on, So when I thought it was interesting when you said to me about the 5 years, I immediately said, it's COVID. That's why we didn't, and it wasn't, I think it would be misleading to suggest we didn't hire anybody in a window that they could have been 5 years now. It's that it didn't work.
Right.
And I don't, you didn't say that, but I wanted to make sure that I clarified a little bit just to say what we're not saying. We're not saying we stopped hiring people.
We didn't stop growing or hiring.
Because we were pretty effective in getting up and running again. It's that those people didn't end up staying. And that's not the first time we've seen that, right? In some of our most explosive growth, we hired lots of people. They just weren't people that were going to be long-term Berg employees, and that leads us to like another point in this life cycle of the company and of the employees and of the team, is you start to get to a point where some of the people who are our longest term people, do they want to do some of the things in the way that they used to do it? And like, I'm being careful walking a line here, but I mean,
sure,
we did a lot of snow work.
Yeah. And
Ford and I, if given the opportunity, I think would do it again, because we know the value of what it could bring if things went right, if it was the right contract and it went right. Having said that, we also transparently sit down and have discussions where I'm like, well, that's great, but like start at the top. Like, let's have a discussion about the two of our lives, and could we be away from home as crazy as it was? And like, it sounds like I'm making it up, but when we would leave for 36 and 48 hours and just be gone, and Aaron and Tamara would just be home alone, you know what I mean? And Aaron, at that point, Ford didn't have any kids. I had 2 daughters at that point, and I would just leave.
Sure. Yeah.
Like, what does that look like for me? Would I really do that? And then you play that out further to our team, right? Like, in other words, well, where was our team when we started that willingness? So that's part of what we're searching for too, is where are these guys, these people, I shouldn't say guys, where's these team members that are hungry like we were hungry then? And that's not to say we're hungry now, but it's the life cycle, and that's really a big piece of trying to build back the team as you continue to grow, is you're not just trying to bring on people who can do the job. You're trying to bring on people who have a similar mindset to the people who made you successful. And that's really hard. I think that's difficult, because then you're not just looking for culture. You're looking for someone who has a certain, has it. You know what I mean? Like when we talk about sports a lot of times and you say like, oh, well, this person has it and nobody knows what it is, but you know it when you see it. And I know, and I'll even single him out. Brad has one of the young kids in the shop. You know what I mean? And Mason, he just loves Mason. Yeah. He said like, and he'll say it to me, he said, just like, he just shows up and wants to work, like he wants to go, he wants to be productive. He's got it. Sure. And so when you see that, you got to really try and embrace it. But then you also have to balance that with not trying to race to reward it, because you need them to go through the same growth pattern, that you went through, or else you risk some of the guys who had it that we either burned themselves out, we burned them out, they went in, like any of those things, so it's a tricky process, even when you have the right people going through it and the right people supporting them. Yeah, for sure.
I don't know that we answered any questions in regards to how we figured that balance out.
We just keep working at it, Brian.
We just keep talking about it, and
thus far it's been trial and error.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah.
So, but we've learned some things along the way. I mean, and that's the truth. And we've talked through a lot of those things. And I think that
the error mostly, the error is mostly how you learn things.
Yeah, it is, right? I mean, you don't learn a whole lot from. I love to win, and I hate to lose, but you don't learn a whole lot from winning, other than that you win. Yeah, it's a lot easier to learn when something doesn't go right. You can dissect it and figure out why it didn't go right and what the mistake was, and try and build on that and say like, okay, so we're going to try and be better. That's.
You try and slowly eliminate things. Not that there's any shortage of things to go wrong, but
no, there's plenty.
You eliminate one thing at a time.
One thing at a time. Yeah. Pull the lever, right? Find the lever that has the biggest impact and pull that lever.
Yeah, exactly. So, all right, that's probably a fair place to wrap it up. Thanks, folks, for joining us today. We hope you got something from this, and we hope you come back for another episode.